Well, this is the APAC migration demo. So let's start off with blockers. Oh, okay, cool, thanks. While we wait for the demo item to merge.
Sounds good. So enable live traces on production. I don't think there's any update.
Nothing,
on
no
this
updates there.
substantial.
The work is ongoing.
Yeah. Remove manifest dependency for pages. It looks like this is moving along nicely, right? Like from what I saw in the
Yes.
last update. And it sounds like very soon we're going to be flipping the switch to start like throwing real exceptions if we write to the pages disk, which
Oh no,
tells me
that's
that we're
already
not.
on. That's already on for a while now.
Yeah, we're tracking them in Sentry, but we're not actually blowing up, right? We're
Oh,
not.
we're not blowing up. That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. So it sounds like we're on the path to start blowing up, or at least feel much more confident in this soon. So this could mean that we're completely unblocked for API and web in
Yep.
that.
No, this is in progress for sure.
Yeah. Mapping services to web API Git. This is going to be problematic for us still, and we still don't really have a good plan. I think for how to deal with this. It's not going to block the Git HTTPS migration, since that uses the that uses a different pod. But when we move to API and web, it's going to be a blocker.
Quick question now that all of this is recorded. What is the main stumbling point here? That the distribution team doesn't want to do this because it doesn't fit the story, or what?
I don't think it's, well, one is that it's like something that pretty much everyone believes is very specific to GitLab.com. It has only priority 3, I guess, because it's not an immediate blocker, but it's going to be a blocker for us very soon.
Okay. Very soon, meaning the next month, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Next month or the month after. I mean, we can do Git SSH. I think like what may throw a wrench into this is that, you know, we have another blocker, which is the cross AZ traffic. So that could extend things for Git HTTPS anyway. But yeah, I think maybe we need to circle around and talk about this some more with the distribution team to see what the plan is.
All right. I'll leave a comment there because we are either going to do something about this or we are going to have to fork the chart. We can't stop, right? And if we fork the chart, you know what that means. So okay, cool. I'll follow up.
The next, while you're doing that, the next 2 issues are closed. So I'm just going to remove them.
Awesome.
Proxy request buffering. I guess you could say this is mitigated because I'm just disabling this globally on the web service pod for now because we're only using Git, but we have to decide whether we want to enable this for web. I think some discussion like for GitLab.com, we already have Cloudflare in front, so maybe we can just leave this disabled globally.
Okay, so just from my understanding, we mitigated this, we didn't resolve it, but do we need to resolve it? We ourselves?
I think it's, I don't know, like, I think it remains to be seen whether, so currently proxy request buffering is disabled for certain paths for Git HTTPS specifically. We're discussing whether we could just disable it for all paths. But this is only going to be a problem when we move to web and API. Another option would be to put this path matching into the chart itself, which we could also do. And that's what this issue is for.
Okay, so this is going to become a blocker in the next quarter, probably.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, let's leave it be. We have other things to work on for now.
Yeah, for sure. The next one we've talked at length about already. This is the cross AZ network traffic. I still think, you know, this really hasn't been fleshed out completely yet, so we need to spend some more time to see what the plan is.
Cool.
Unencrypted network connection between Nginx and Workhorse. This came out of the readiness review. I don't know, like, I've talked to a bunch of people about this. It doesn't feel like it's any worse than having the Unix socket. I mean, I think like I think what could be bad here is for compliance checkboxes where you have unencrypted traffic traveling between nodes potentially in our current configuration. And obviously you need to have root. And I don't know, maybe Graham or Craig, maybe you guys know, if you have an unprivileged container, or maybe Mara knows, if you have an unprivileged container and you have root access, can you see all network traffic that's going into that container?
To the container itself. If you're on the container, yeah, you probably would be able. Oh no, you need root to tap it, wouldn't you? Unprivileged container. And the network.
The answer may have changed over the years as well, because I think the PCAP capabilities or whatever the syscall that you need to actually tap it varies wildly off what version of Docker and other bits and pieces you're using. My thought with GKE and what they have is that, yes, you would have the ability to do that within your container only, but I would have to go and actually test. And I could very well be wrong.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I did when we were looking at that registry problem a month or two back. I'm sure I jumped in a container around TCP dump because I was running it on the HA proxy node and on the container to see where the stuff was going. So you can have done that.
Okay, just curious. I think like even with the Unix socket and you have root access, you obviously can still. It's pretty much game over anyway, right? So I don't know if it's that big of an issue, except possibly for compliance. And I think it's exacerbated by the fact that previously we had, you know, Nginx and Workhorse on the same VM. Now we have Nginx and Workhorse on potentially two different nodes with traffic traveling across availability zones even. So it's a bit different.
Yeah, but another thing, like two things, Jar. First of all, does any of you know whether we are whether we added TLS to Gitly traffic?
We've tried several times, haven't we?
Okay, so I know that we tried several times, but that also gives me an answer probably.
I'm pretty sure that never made over the line, did it? It was, I think we broke staging a few times and never quite got as far as turning it on in production.
So if that is already not encrypted, then I don't think necessarily we need to discuss this right now, because this is like definitely a bigger issue than just this. And Jar, for compliance only necessarily cares if there is traffic across network that is unencrypted. Like who has access on what is important for them, but if you already have root access based on certain rules, then right, like you have that privilege anyway, so you can do quite a lot of damage anyway. I would suggest though that we remove this from being a blocker for now, just because we have enough blockers right now, and maybe revisit it if it becomes an issue.
That sounds good to me. I'll do that.
Cool, thank you. And maybe in the meantime, we actually have encrypted traffic towards Gitly or from Gitly, so then this becomes more urgent as well. Just to be clear, because this is being obviously recorded, I'm not trying to brush off that this is not a real problem. It is a problem. I'm just managing expectations a bit because I'm not really sure whether this is something we need to resolve immediately.
Okay, that sounds good. I think that's pretty much it for blockers. We can move forward to the demo. So the demo is going to be to enable Git HTTPS traffic in Canary. We already have a change issue. It's been approved by the on-call. So we're good to execute. One thing I did notice earlier today was that we're missing some Canary logs, and that should be applying now, and we can verify that first. Okay, so that's applied. So before we start this, we should see workhorse logs right now for Canary. Let's see. So I might need to refresh index patterns here. Don't see anything yet. So let's jump to. I'm going to hop on a Canary node and see what's going on. Screen.
People here I know Craig Miskell, you've seen this, but just for everyone else being aware, we did see over the weekend on call, I noticed some strange behaviors with Fluentd Elasticsearch in some of the settings, and I've got a corrective action to have a tweak of some of our settings and stuff relating to what happens when logs can't be delivered. I'm not saying this is related to this necessarily, but we do want to make sure that we're not just going to fill up all of Fluentd's buffer with failed error logs.
So if you don't know how this is set up, we have Fluentd running as a daemon set. So there's Fluentd running on every single node. We can take a look at a web service pod and take a look at one of the nodes that it's on. So what I usually do is I'll find this same, the Fluentd that's running on this node, for example. So I'll just do grep for WC. So there's the Fluentd, so I can do select. We can SSH to it. And then we can look at the configuration. So at the very top, we should see the log paths. And it looks like, let me just, oh, there it is. So let's just grep for Canary in this. So this is the web service log and this is the workhorse log. So we can just do this glob to see if it's actually, and it looks like that glob is there. So, and if we tail one of these logs, let me just do all of them. So I'm a little surprised. I would expect to see logs coming out of here because of readiness checks.
A silly question. Is it we're deploying right now to Canary? Like, does this have anything to do with it? No.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at these logs. So here we have logs for the Rails. And I'm seeing the log here for readiness. It's a bit weird that I don't see it for workhorse, but anyway, let's then check Rails. See if we now see logs from Elasticsearch there. Again, I'll try index pattern update. Okay, so now they're showing up here. So we see some GET requests for metrics. This is coming from which log file? Maybe.
Screen is static here. The screen you're sharing.
Oh, it stopped. Try again. So now we're seeing logs and Rails. I mean, there's really just not a lot going on right now because there's no traffic being taken. So I think we're just seeing like these GET requests for metrics from the web exporter log, which are not structured. So yeah, nothing really interesting here. But at least they're coming through now. What I don't understand is why we're not seeing them for workhorse, because I think I would expect to see logs for workhorse. So maybe pod is no longer present. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to send some dummy requests to Canary, and we'll see whether that helps to generate some logs. Let me find a way to do that. If we do, we can get the service to see what the Nginx external IP, the Nginx ingress external IP is. So you can see here, and this is the this is what we're adding to HA proxy. If I do a curl, we'll need to do something for get HTTPS for that. We'll do like a git upload pack. Ah. So that's working, so that's good. About, we send a bunch of requests here. Let's do a rate of like, I don't know, 5 a second. Change this header. Option because we're not doing HTTPS validation. And we'll just run this for 5 seconds to see if it works. So this is good. We got 26,200 responses. This is the latency distribution. Let's run this for a bit longer. And then let's look at logs. So we see the logs coming in here. So that looks good from the Rails. Now I just want to see workhorse logs, and I'll be happy. Let's do 15 minutes. Now 15 days, 15 minutes. So interesting. We see other requests coming in, but not for Kubernetes. I'll try to refresh the index mappings again. Aha, now they're here. Wonderful. I see them now. Kubernetes container image. Let's just disable, disable, disable. Finally. Still nothing showing up in Elastic, which is really strange. And I see like the logs now showing up in the workhorse log. For the correlation ID. Well, I think I'm going to have to dig into this a bit more before we start the change issue. And I don't know whether troubleshooting this live is a good use of everyone's time. Graham, if you're still there, would you like to talk a bit about your proposal?
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't read through your issues or anything yet, so earlier today I kind of put a proposal or a point of discussion or something to paper. The issue itself is quite long, and I don't want to tie up too much of people's time here as we only have 10 minutes left, so I'll try and put together a very, very quick and brief summary. But basically, you know, I talk a lot with people in the community, and I'm looking at what we're doing, and I'm always thinking of ways we can, you know, improve what we do. I work very closely with the configure team as part of the GitLab product as well. I try and provide a lot of feedback to them on how we do things, how they can make GitLab better to help us, and things like that. One of the things that kind of jumped out to me across all of this is the kind of way we use. I'm going to talk about Helm and Helm file, but really it doesn't matter about the deployment tool per se. But one of the interesting things in the way we do use Helm and Helm file and how we deploy our Kubernetes stuff at the moment is that we kind of use Helm and Helm file to do 3 actual distinct phases. And the reason we do that is because the way everyone typically starts doing things with Helm and Kubernetes is to adopt Helm doing these 3 phases. And those are, Helm gives us a templating engine, so it allows us to, you know, get upstream Helm charts and a whole bunch of YAML manifests. It allows us to inject some values per environment. It allows us to do things like grab values out of Chef. It allows us to do all of this stuff, and the output is a set of YAML manifests that we're actually interested in, the final result. The second part that Helm and Helm file give us is then that kind of diff or apply. You know, I want to diff this against what's actually currently there and see what's changed, or I actually now want to actually apply this to my cluster. And then the final part that we use Helm and Helm file for is that validation. How do we get something back that says, yes, what you did is successful, or no, what you did is failure, and, you know, maybe even roll that thing back for me automatically. And one of the things I commonly see is that as people grow with doing deployments on Kubernetes, as their tooling grows, as their complexity grows, having one tool to do all those 3 stages might not be enough. And I'm certainly starting to see that now a little bit, I think, with where we're kind of at in our kind of journey and deployment. So the proposal in a nutshell is starting to look at deconstruct those 3 phases and maybe look at how we can, by deconstructing them, innovate or change the way we do each stage independently. There's a talk about GitOps in there and like Kubernetes I say Kubernetes TM trademarked version of GitOps because they have a specific way of how they talk about it, which I thought was fairly not important, but I've come to realize some of the value in the way they try and describe to do things. But what I'm trying to push for in the proposal is, at the moment, we just go Helm file diff, Helm file apply. We just use Helm for templating. We use Helm file to diff. We use Helm file to apply things. We use Helm file to roll it back. It's all just in one kind of tool. And we bump against the kind of pros and cons of that. We hit problems and, you know, we're basically locked into what that thing can offer us. But if we think about it in an abstract sense and start to pull this out, I feel there's some opportunity for us to innovate in each particular area and leave us open to actually changing tools or changing processes at each individual level. So for an example, I won't get into the nitty gritty details. Sorry, my brain's mush at the moment. But one of the key factors is every Kubernetes deployment tool is able to be used in a mode where it will output the final manifest. So you can run Helm file template, you could run, I don't know, k8s template's another one, customized template. All of the tools have a way to say, I still want to use this tool to template, but I just want the output to be a final set of real YAML Kubernetes manifests into a directory or a folder structure or however you want to set it up. So if we actually look at the templating step, we can actually say that we don't actually care really too much about what tool we use at that step. We can make, you know, we can use Helm file or whatever, but what we really want the output of that is to be the actual raw manifests. And then if we actually have a process of passing those raw manifests into the input of some different repo tool process, then we can actually have a different way of using diff and apply and actually controlling how we actually apply those manifests to a cluster. In the issue itself, I've talked a bit about the GitOps controllers. I've talked a bit about CI/CD. I've talked a bit about how kubectl itself and the Kube API server has now become one of, if not the best citizen to actually, a first-class citizen and actually doing diffs and applies. They've made a lot of effort to actually make it a really solid engine now for actually doing Kubernetes applying and deploying manifests. And then finally, that third step, that validation step, is something I think we can actually explore and start to explode out as well, because we've talked about this a little bit before about, okay, well, you know, I've applied my manifests, you know, whatever has changed. So let's say my deployment has changed. What is the extra validation I can do to make sure that my deployment is successful? Am I watching metrics? Am I watching logs? Is there a test suite I could actually run, like curl some commands or something? So that's very rambly and I do apologize, but that's kind of what I'm trying to look at, is by using, especially starting with pulling that GitOps part in the middle out, we actually move away from Helm file and Helm doing everything to just doing templating. Then we look at how we can have one clean, discrete repo that holds all the templated manifests, very clear, very declarative. There's no way if you run it twice, you know, with Helm file at the moment, because we are pulling things from all different sources, you know, there's potentials for deviations to happen, although it hasn't really hurt us so far. Whereas if we're using like a kind of true GitOps approach where you have your Git repo contains the rendered manifests all right there and then, it becomes very easy for anyone to look at those to see what is in the cluster. You can start to do static code analysis against those, audit all my YAML files, see if anyone's running pods as root, making sure people are using good service accounts, things like that, which is a lot easier to do than, you know, currently trying to integrate with the tools we have. And then finally, that validation step, kubectl has got some first-class operators, first-class command line options now to actually do in-depth monitoring of resources, like watch this rollout set, you know, for every resource that has a specific label, can you tell me when that resource is in a ready state? And from there also, we can start to explore how do we want to test that something has changed and been successful beyond just saying the Kubernetes API server says it's okay? How do we actually inject some kind of unit tests or real tests to say, okay, when you actually apply the manifest, now please run this to make sure something is useful. So I think not only does this have the potential to help us straight away, but as a small side effect, this kind of experience and everything will allow us to feed back into the product, because this is the area in auto DevOps and all of the Kubernetes integration for GitLab, the product they're struggling with. Like they're trying to figure out, how do we make this better beyond just running Helm apply and then just telling the user, oh, you know, it failed. Good luck with that kind of
fingers crossed, right? Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, like run Helm apply and fingers crossed, basically, right?
Yeah,
like figure it out yourself. I'll admit I didn't read the whole thing. You popped it up in your work time, and I didn't have the time to read it, but I find it an interesting idea. I think we are all very much aware of the limitations that we have with our Helm charts, with Helm file, with our official Helm charts as well. What I find interesting about this is it would allow us to set for a path that will also allow the official Helm charts to figure out one of the bigger problems they have, and that is the whole life cycle, like management, which is really difficult. I think you'll be surprised to hear that we have been thinking about, or rather I have been thinking about, how are we going to even get there? Because right now our primary concern is migration, right? Like just do lift and shift. But we have another requirement, which is we need to replicate multiple GitLab.coms. So this would be the next big step. Like if we were to do this, like on the highest level, if we were to continue using what we use right now, gather all the operational experience we have with Helm file and all of that, migrate all of the things that we need to migrate, we would be able to be the ones who are setting the trend forward, where we will be able to say we are Helm templating only, and we are thinking about how can we use an operator, whatever, to operate those manifests, right? And I think this is the path we'll go, and I think you are giving us like a good set of steps that we could take to go into that direction, right? Like if you isolate only templating first, and then leave the rest to someone else to figure out. So I feel like this is like probably a future proposal, something that we should definitely continue talking about. I wouldn't focus too much on the GitOps aspect and like all of that. I would try to keep an open mind there, and maybe like bring in those requirements of us running multiple GitLab.coms. This is really important because whatever small decision we make in our world, we need to be able to replicate it to others, and that will also help self-managed customers, right? Like if we manage to package it up for them as well, it would be very useful. And we don't want to probably make too many rapid decisions at the moment of what tool do we use for that.
Sure. And I think, yeah, so I mean, for the quote unquote GitOps part, all I'm really suggesting there is actually just using kubectl. So that part is just kubectl apply, kubectl diff, no other tool, which I think is good in its kind of simplicity as well. We're not trying to pick some other flux or anything too crazy. We just stick with the basic kubectl part. And you're right, the large scale working group now means, I mean, if we're going down the path of extra clusters for prod, we're going to have 3 clusters for prod, 3 for stage, 3 for pre, I assume. Then if we ever decide to go multi-region for GitLab.com, that's 3 per region. So it comes 9 for one region, you know. Then if we do multiple GitLab.com, so GitLab.eu, and like the amount of environments we have just starts to multiply exponentially as well, which is another drive for this. obviously everyone here is focused on the GitLab.com part, which is the most important part, but we're starting to get more little bits and pieces from the other teams as well who are deploying with Kubernetes as well. So I think there's benefits to some of this, like the validation stuff I think is really interesting, not just for GitLab.com, but how do we tell anyone, hey, look, I want to run Elasticsearch, I want to run Kibana, all of our team's tools on top of Kubernetes, giving them a framework to say, not only do you just deploy it, now you can think about how you want to test that and drive that level of maturity up. And certainly even when we're migrating our pieces for GitLab.com, how do we test every time we redeploy Sidekick that it's still working? Like, how do we make sure Workhorse, when we're doing this migration of the web tier, how can we define a small set of tests that's not just the deployment has succeeded, but we're also confident that nothing is wrong?
So in order for this not to be just dead letters on paper, I'd encourage you, if you get a chance, to think about, like, again, I didn't read everything you wrote, so maybe you already wrote this down. But I would encourage you to find like one of the smaller steps that we could do right now to just not derail the migration itself, but get us into a direction where we are going to have clearer separation between templating, diff applying, like whatever you can do to isolate those things and like do some verification on that those steps as well, right? Like that could be like we don't want a big bang migration again,
no,
right? Like we want a smaller step moves.
No, I agree. And I think even when we did the migration to Helm file, we kind of did GitLab.com first, because I think we got the most value out of that. But I agree. I think this time I would try and see if I could demo or come up with an example for just one of the many. We've got a few very small, simple apps now that I could just say, hey, this is what it looked like before. This is what it looks like now. And that could be a good second step. I haven't figured out all the problems or everything, and I would want to think about it a little bit more. But as I just said, it was just an interesting idea that I've been thinking about, and it gets us out of worrying about Helm and Helm releases. It gets us worrying about, like, we don't have to care what cluster, if it uses Helm 3 or Helm 2. If it's all just Kubernetes manifest, we draw a nice big line in the sand around what we're using everything for, and we can kind of. And for engineers on call, I think it'll be easier for them to kind of, while they might, engineers on call probably aren't too worried about the templating part. They're more just interested in, I'm on call, what's running here, where, what could be broken, what configuration is set where. So I think it has potential for engineers on call who aren't as involved in the Kubernetes work to just kind of, easy for them to kind of get into and understand just for their on call what they need to see and know, potentially.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited about this. Like we should talk about it a bit and see what we can do. And I'm looking forward to reading it all.
Yeah, I read over the issue this morning. I really liked it as well. I think I put a couple of concerns in the issue, just like having two different pipelines and being able to track who changed what, especially when the pipeline that runs kubectl is generated from a different pipeline. So that way it might be a step backwards a bit, because right now it's just, one single pipeline, and it's easy to determine who made the changes. But I like having the diffs in, like having the changes exposed or checked into Git, for the raw manifest. This is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole preserving that workflow, the workflow we have right now is really nice. I put an MR up, I get a nice report of the diffs and everything, and I would not want to go backwards with that. And from talking to people, how they kind of solve it is there's a lot of just custom code. People write bots, automation, what have you. I'm not convinced we need to go. I would like to start jumping into that, especially because we're not at the scale of some of these other companies. So that part I would need to understand what GitLab CI can give us and how that would work. And I think, to be honest, a bulk of the work around this probably wouldn't be so much changing things like Helm file or whatever, because I think they basically give us what we want right now. I think a bulk of the investigative work for this would actually be the CI part and the user experience part to make sure we still got that nice experience.
Yeah.
So, Joey, I see you written down in your comment that working outside of the official chart. I'm willing to find a way to support this working outside of the official charts, as long as we also have a path. How are we going to be bringing this back in? I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that the Helm charts need to change significantly, because it's just like our application complexity, like it's just unusable in some cases, right? It's really difficult to use it. So everyone is prepared for it. As long as we set the trend, we move out of the official charts, and we also describe a path, how are we going to bring this thing back into something that people could use. It's fine. We can diverge. And one way of doing that is always thinking about how are we going to do the multi-large, like multiple GitLab.coms, because that actually puts us on the path of self-managed customers, basically, right? So as long as that is the case, we can diverge.
I think the challenges around having multiple deployments is going to be the tooling that has to sit on top of those multiple deployments more than anything, right? Like,
are we expected to manage, like, I know the GitLab.cn, the China one, is
No.
not going to be GitLab.com.
We can.
It's not going to be GitLab the company, but is the other ones going to be GitLab the company?
So we can't say that is going to be the case, because we don't know. Well, for .cn, most likely it's not going to happen. But think about federal instances as well. Right. We can't as well. Maybe we have a subset of employees that can, but it's not going to be the whole infrastructure department.
Okay, sure.
And the chances of that happening for .eu and like others is like really, really high. So ultimately, us managing the multiples with a single tool or something like that, that ain't going to happen. What is more important is that the operational experience, the running experience that we have at GitLab.com can be relatively simply replicated across those big instances, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we need to think more. And that's why I'm saying, like, let's not get too locked down in what GitLab can do, GitLab.com can do, because that's where we don't want to be too prescriptive. Sure. But what we want to do is like the general concept of, you give this one installation method that we run on GitLab.com to other teams, and you educate them to use it. That's where the value comes. So is that what you were aiming at, Jer? Were you aiming at like managing the multiples, or what exactly?
Well, I guess I think like by doing this, we'll be tempted to kind of go on our own path without necessarily a lot of motivation to get things back into the chart, especially for features that are only really needed by us. And of course, there are some very large deployments out there, but I think that it's just something we need to be careful about, I think, because right now we are fairly limited. We don't have any manifests that are applied outside of the chart, and everything that we're doing has to kind of feed back into the chart. And we're talking about things that really only apply to us in some ways, right? Or and for these sort of things, I think if we had this set up, then we would just probably work around the charts for expediency.
Yeah, we could still use the charts as the template, like, Helm file with the upstream with the GitLab chart can still be the first input to the process. I think if we push, we can still push everything up to the chart as much as possible if we want. Okay. I guess that question is up to us, really.
So let me just try to put this a tiny bit differently for both of you, actually. the whole point of dogfooding the Helm charts, the whole point of us not drifting from that is not because we just don't want to. It is so that we don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again. And also is that our customers don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again, because we already experience it. Why not share it with them and charge it on them, right? So the fact that GitLab.com might have some special requirements, we have special requirements because we are a very large instance of GitLab. And even if we talk about orders of magnitude less of a size for customers, if they can use this and leverage the same tool for us, from us, that is also already valuable. Maybe it's not valuable for people with a single node cluster installation that are running this on Raspberry Pi cluster. Sure, I think you'll see that in there we don't have to necessarily justify that diff because we are running a different thing. But as long as we say that any large instance of GitLab can use this same approach and switch configuration only, right? Like IP addresses and so on, to use this, and this is how you do it, there is already value in this. And Jarvis, you're already seeing some problems we are running into with the charts, right? Like for example, the labeling, right? The API split, all of that splits that the chart doesn't necessarily need, but we need as GitLab.com. That's already a good enough reason for me to say, you know what, we really need it. The charts really doesn't. Let's see if we need to fork, if we need to do something outside. And then if we do something outside, it is up to all of us to discuss why did we do this outside and how do we bring this back. So the point here is, as long as there is a real value that this company and our work can actually contribute to the company across larger instances, larger customers, and so on, we don't have to necessarily immediately care about every single installation. Does that help?
Yeah, I think
it's a bit of a different approach, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I think this is, I mean, I think we could, there's nothing preventing us from diverging from the GitLab chart now even. You know, we can patch things in, it's just that we haven't yet. And yeah, so I think this is a good approach for us, and it'd be interesting to do a POC. I don't know what the priority of like seeing whether this will work for us is, but it would be interesting to try it for maybe like GitLab Helm files first, and then
yeah. I was hoping to even just pick one release in GitLab Helm files to start with,
yeah.
see if like just a simple one that's like 5 resources big, and try and see if I could just create a repo somewhere, you know, just like a fork or something somewhere where I could demo it and show I think once we see the real pipeline, right, and what each step is, how it looks, and what the feedback is from the user experience, then we can kind of understand if this is something we want to do or if this is too difficult or,
Yep.
And I don't have the full answer to everything yet. So I would like to try and kind of test it out really and see how it looks. In terms of priority for me, I'm busy till the end of this week, but it's only Fridays tomorrow, so I've got one more day. But I can probably look at picking this up next week.
Graham, I would even be more conservative than that. Let me put it this way. I know some things that are on your plate, and I'm not too excited to see what is on your plate, because those things are important, but also hard to do. I would do this as a side task when you have some time over the next period of time, right? Like over the next 2-3 months and so on, because ultimately what is really important for us is to do the lift and shift, right? To do this migration, get actually application functional. But then if you do this, like you said, on a non-GitLab.com specific item, right? Like, I don't know, Elastic or whatever we end up doing, I don't really know. Like that might be a good way of doing it, and then you can do it over a slower period of time. So the priority is like it's funny to say this, but like, it's not like it's a low priority or a high priority. It's just on a completely different path.
Yeah,
And
no,
those paths are kind of in parallel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would want, if we think this works, I would want to do the GitLab chart last, because I think that we will find a lot of questions we'll have along the way that we can answer them safely with like Elastic or Prometheus or all the other little bits and pieces we have around first before we finally tackle the biggest part. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't put this as on any part of the critical path for migration or anything like that. It's more interest. It's probably more interesting to those people who are working on the smaller pieces, because the people who work on the smaller pieces, you know, they spend less time with the Kubernetes stuff. So, you know, and they have trickier things. Like, we've got very good monitoring around GitLab.com. We don't have quite as good monitoring around some of our little applications that we have. So, you know, some of the improvements that we could bring, like validation and stuff, might be more useful to them than it will be for GitLab, simply because we're pretty good at validating GitLab.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Grim, thanks for sharing. Jarv, thanks for demoing. I hope you get to find what's happening and why the logs are not showing up. Do let us know once you do. I'm curious as well to see what's happening there. And yeah, thanks so much for the discussion.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
All right. Have a good one.
Ciao.
Bye.